It's been described by some journalists as unprecedented. Dozens of Ontario government staffers applauding to drown out reporters' questions. It's becoming an increasingly familiar sight at the PC government's press conferences, and that's leading some reporters to question who's really behind the applause. We're back with the Power Panel, Jason, Marika, and Marty. Marika, I've got to start with you because this is your beat, and you were there. Tell us what happened.
So everybody walked into the room yesterday for the press conference, and everybody noticed right away that there were dozens of staffers at the back of the room. And there's usually a dozen or maybe 24 staffers, but there was certainly a marked difference, many more people. And so we were wondering, were they there to applaud, or were they there to maybe show that they weren't going to applaud anymore? It turns out they were there to applaud the Premier, and that's exactly what they did.
And so are they applauding to actually stop reporters from asking questions, or, I mean, is the press conference over when that happens?
Well, it's a bit of both. So this started during the election campaign where the PCs wanted a clean exit for the Premier, and the way they would, or the leader at that time, the way they would do that is they'd get the staff to applaud so the TV cameras and mics couldn't pick up the questions that were still being yelled at Doug Ford. And at that time, it's campaign staff, right? But now it's taxpayer-paid staff who are on hand for these press conferences to keep that trend alive.
Okay, Jason, so should people care, or is this sort of reporters getting mad about stuff that just feeds into the narrative that Doug Ford wants out there?
Part of that is that, and I mean, if I rack my brains for why he would do this, I mean, because to a lot of people, who don't like him, he'll look petty, worried that he might be baited into asking more questions than his handlers want him to be. He looks bad from that perspective, but if he wants to make it a story about the media versus him, which seems to be what Doug Ford and his brother Rob Ford, former mayor, like to do at City Hall, journalists are playing into this. But it is fundamentally undemocratic, and journalists, we just can't sit there back and take it. I mean, we're going to have to do. I mean, journalists in Queen's Park are going to have to do something. I mean, I've wondered maybe bringing an air horn or vuvuzela to join in and maybe punish them a little bit, or remind people that Doug Ford is a guy who likes to watch his dollars and cents. And I just did a back of a napkin calculation the other day on Twitter, and if it's 40-some journalists taking half an hour out of their day to do this, you're probably looking at several $100s, and that's money that Doug Ford likes to mind when he's cracking down on people's basic income payments or lunches for cabinet staff.
Marty, what do you think? Do you think journalists should do something, or just, I don't know?
You shake their fist loudly. It's whatever. You can, press council. There's all sorts of. I don't know exactly what the mechanism would be to be dealing with this. What I would say though is that this is sort of from the "What do you expect" file. Can I use a $10 word for a second?
Go for it.
My leitmotif. That is
too rich for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's like $20. Anyway.
What's vuvuzela worth?
Yeah, exactly. Doug Ford hates the media. Two things. Doug Ford hates the media. Doug Ford loves to be in the media. So by doing this, he gets to fulfill two desires. In fact, he sort of almost fulfills three in the sense that he doesn't even have to answer any questions. And in fact, he fulfills a fourth by going, I get to show the entire province about how much my staff loves me and how much staff loves my ideas. This is part and parcel Doug Ford. And anybody that thought they were going to get any different should be ashamed of themselves.
What do you think, Marika? Is it difficult to sort of figure out how, or is there any consensus on how journalists in the room should respond?
I think journalists are still figuring that out. Certainly, we're now organizing ourselves to figure out what the main question should be, because you get 5 questions max now. I think also, though, Jason and Marty are right that journalists in some ways are playing into it, but at the same time, you need to find a way to call it out. And I think that people are still trying to figure that out. I think that Cynthia Mulligan was smart in asking the staffers why they're there, right? Because if they're going to be there at a public event, then they turn into fair game for reporters to ask them why they're there. Nobody wanted to say why they were there. Nobody wanted to say who told them to be there. And so I think that journalists should be pointing it out, but I think that journalists need to be careful that they don't look like they are fighting something.
Do you think that's true, Jason?
I mean, I think if he starts looking wasteful on this, if he starts looking petty on this, if he starts looking afraid of journalists' questions and having to answer things, then he looks bad. I mean, I thought, when they first did this and it was widely derided, I was surprised to hear that Marika said it was even bigger the second time this was done yesterday. As he keeps raising the stakes on this and spends more and more taxpayer money and political staff time, I mean, those people do something. They are valued at something. Maybe they could give him better talking points to answer better questions. I don't know.
It's funny, Marty, because when Marika mentioned, journalists having to get together and figure out what questions they're going to ask, I remember doing that on pool trips with Prime Minister Harper, because in foreign places he would only take a certain number of questions. And there was always this discussion, like, do Canadians actually care, or is this just the media talking about itself and being, too consumed with its own self? Do you think there's the danger of veering into that territory here?
Certainly, I think that's what Doug Ford thinks. And to Jason's point, a normal human being, after maybe 2 or 3 times of doing this, would go, okay, enough already. But Doug Ford really, really despises the media. And so I can sort of see it as just being a parlor trick. That's something that really, his base likes the media almost as little as he does. And having him come out and do this is a very, very good way to sort of say, shove off, we don't like the media establishment, and we're going to keep doing this.
Okay, I've got to leave it there, but thanks so much to the Power Panel. Everyone have a great weekend. Thanks to Jason Markusoff, Marika Walsh, and Marty Patrolkin.